both for the chapel completion, but also for consideration of what to do with and about this space. And the building committee asked me if I could give a little bit of a history of this building, and then show you a few pictures of what lies underneath where you're sitting and what lies within the walls of this building that might make you cringe slightly. This building was built in 1968, funded by the 3 Illinois dioceses and private contributions. Father Arvidsson, who was the former chaplain who preceded Father Hallett, literally gave his life to raise the money to replace what was a dilapidated frame house with this center for the ministry. This building served us far better than an old house ever could, but by all accounts, this building has never really quite served us adequately. We're thankful to both him and Father Hallett, under whose leadership we completed the church building, and that we're actually here today, 50 years plus later, to discuss the next step in our ministry's development and maturation. 9 years ago, a professional church consultant shocked several of us when he proclaimed we would not find any priest to take this place unless we did something about Canterbury House. We hired an architect just to see what we could do to spruce the place up, not thinking that there's anything terribly wrong with this place. Make the first floor lounge more useful, maybe a little bigger for social events, generally make the place more attractive to a prospective new rector. What we discovered is it would have been poor stewardship to spend any money on cosmetic improvements, and it would be extremely poor stewardship to attempt to renovate this building because there's so much which needs remedial attention. 2 years ago, the vestry and the building committee engaged Carson Durham and BLDD, who are here today, to ask you, everyone in the parish, everyone, to identify what we need in a building to support the ministries of the chapel. And we learned a lot about our ministries and us personally, and we learned a lot about our needs. We learned it would be extremely poor stewardship, it was emphasized to us, to renovate this building. Aside from its physical deterioration, it simply doesn't meet our needs. In fact, it's actually thwarting what should be a socially vibrant living congregation, and that was alluded to earlier. We know we can't do nothing. In 2018, we presented our findings to the annual meeting and proposed a plan to continue to develop building designs for the new Canterbury House. Coincidentally, at that very moment, the building committee and the vestry were given an exciting opportunity almost at the 11th hour. Our own parishioner, architecture Professor Paul Kapp, conducted a design competition of his graduate students to design a new Canterbury House according to the program developed by your input and as then codified by BLDD. These submissions were all highly detailed, almost down to the brick, and had modeling and all wonderful professional kinds of details. And there's one, however, that was done by a fellow named Matt Kluge, which stood head and shoulders above all the others. And it's the one that we will present to you today as modified for real-life buildability by the folks at BLDD. Back in 1927, a group of students daringly erected the porch in front of the chapel and challenged, I was going to say dared, the 3 dioceses to build a church fitting that beautiful entrance. Well, we finished the chapel in 2005 with the support, commitment, and expertise of our parishioners, students, and alumni. And I can't think of a more concrete way to cement this ministry here than by having not only the porch of the chapel being built by the students, but a new Canterbury House basically designed by a student. The building committee's asked me to show you some pictures I've taken recently and a couple of years ago in and around this building, and describe you some of the very real problems from which this building and we suffer. So what is this building telling us? Let's go to the next slide. That's too far.
Oh, you want to go
Back.
Here.
Back.
That's the beginning.
Oh, okay, then the first one. There we go. What is it telling us? We have had great times here. We've worshiped here, as Lorraine said. We've celebrated here, worked here, cared for our infants, taught our children here. Next slide.
And see the stained glass.
Yeah, the stained glass up there. Yeah, right over there is where we were. And not to be unclassed, when we were down here worshiping, we had a little pipe organ, of course. We've cooked, although we're not supposed to. We've eaten, cleaned, laughed, and I don't know what joke Stephanie Swift was telling, but it just brought everybody into tears. Next slide, please. This building has served us for 52 years. And as Lorraine pointed out, we all have really fond memories of what happened here and the people with whom we interacted and had such wonderful times. But it's not in good shape, and we need to sort of step back and see, what about this building? What could we do better? And then, as Jamie will outline, how can a new building actually grow our ministry to the point where we can have additional staff? Let's go to the next one. Well, what is this building telling us? Walk outside, step across the street, and amble down the block a bit to the north, and what do you see? An heroic neo-Gothic church with an unattractive little red brick chalet next door, surmounted by a giant satellite antenna, which doesn't work anymore, on the roof, which is tearing off little by little every time we have a windstorm, a PVC drain pipe which dumps water into an outdoor sewer every so often, and everything is surrounded by a brick wall with stairs everywhere. There might as well be a moat between the chapel and the campus. The two buildings' incompatibility suggests to me institutional schizophrenia. There's just as you're walking down the sidewalk, that's the scope, the scale that you see the brick wall and then the unused space between the buildings. Since I've ruined my knee, I have gained a real appreciation for what someone in a wheelchair has to go through. Coming in the door in the back, first of all, these kinds of stairs you have to go up and you take your life in your hand when you do. But to get in, you have to go all the way around to the one ramp, which is out beside the chapel, and then come up and in, and then you can decide to go up or down in that. And you better make sure that somebody knows you're in it so that when you're stuck, they can come and get you. Next slide. Here's how we have had to repair heaving concrete because we can't afford to tear it all up. This PVC pipe I mentioned before, that was installed because the drain to the sump pump that's in that closet over to the side, the drain has become so clogged that there's no way that even professionals can dig through it anymore. You have to run a new sewer line to the street. So in order to prevent tens and tens of thousands of dollars of damage, that was the solution. Next. It's okay. There we are. So upon entering the building, what's the first thing you see? Sliding glass doors housing our choral library because the basement choir room grows mold on the musical scores. Oh, this was originally the chapel gift shop. So next slide, please. So where is the office? Where is the priest? Where is the bathroom? We've got plenty of signs to direct you, but the more signs a building needs, the poorer its design. If I'm wandering the streets at night and get into this building when the side door sticks, I can actually go right up to the apartments and knock. The upstairs lounge is open to the hallway, so there's no privacy. There is no safe covered connection from Canterbury House into the chapel. There's not one homey room in this building in which one can comfortably relax, hang out, or visit with friends over coffee, and that's precisely what this building is supposed to be able to do. We can't hold Sunday school classes and adult education classes at the same time or have the vestry or other committee meetings until the rooms are free. Here you see just an example of some of the communication wiring which has been kludged in from one place to another where there are not even any electrical boxes anymore. Something about this building that I discovered in one of my iterations as parish warden is that all of the high voltage wiring is aluminum and not copper, and that's actually a fire hazard. Also, there is only one electric meter for all the buildings. This building, the apartments, the chapel, it's 1 meter. Next. This is just a quick shot in the kitchenette upstairs to show you the communication wiring for telephones, internet, and our own defunct in-house fire alarm system. Nobody can trace the wiring to make any repairs, so it has been overwired several times just because you can't trace the wires Windows in this building are not only energy inefficient, but you can't get spare parts for them. The handles, the screens are broken. It's Chuck and I, who have traded off parish warden duties, have tried to even sew the screens together, and it's just beyond maintenance anymore. Next. And our elevator is actually not called an elevator. The way we were able to get away with putting it in is it is a limited utility, limited access lift. And it was purchased with funds provided by the Episcopal Church women. We got a grant of $20,000 to put that in many years ago. Although yes, it's better than nothing, and that's what we looked at the time. A wheelchair can get in, but without an attendant and without any way to turn around or anything. The only reason that was allowed by the city is because the hoistway that was there was what was provided in 1968 by the original architects. And the key that you see there, when we put the elevator in, we added a key for security, so somebody couldn't just walk into Canterbury House and go up to the apartments. But the problem is that you have a key, that means somebody has to have the key in order to make it work. And when you lose all the keys, then it doesn't work, and on and on and on. Next, please. The kitchenette actually acts more as a storeroom, break room, prep area for reception and lounge. There are actually no dedicated storage areas in this building. The only storage that we have is underneath the stairs on both sides, and those are actually illegal. Back one. The plumbing, when we have problems in the apartments, we have to actually excavate. Excavate is the right word. We have to tear out the ceiling below where the problem is in order to fix it. And I believe Father Sean will tell you that it was at just like the day before a funeral reception. The plumbing upstairs gave way, and there was a flood coming down into Canterbury House. This is the day before a funeral reception, and in the hallway, and that had to be dealt with. And we just put a plastic pan up there and screwed it up because we know we're going to need to get to that plumbing again. The nursery is actually the farthest room away from the chapel, and you have to get through 4 doors in order to get there, 4 series of doors to get there. And the bathroom, you can't open the door all the way because the sink is in the way, and if you have that little stairway there so that a tot can wash his or her hands, you can't get in and the child might get stuck. There's not any storage in the nursery for anything, and as a result we have this not only unsightly but unsanitary storage. The entire south side of the building is not air conditioned, but it's been made habitable by a window unit and a temporary unit. The bathrooms on the first floor in the corridor are non-accessible. The only ventilation for those bathrooms and the apartment's bathrooms upstairs is by a single 4-inch duct, which is 4 times too small, and ventilated by a single fan with a motor in the attic that's been disabled 35 years ago. Or 30 years ago, sorry, I exaggerate. Sorry. One thing you don't really look at, but when you come up and down the stairs, is the banisters, the stair rails. The stairs themselves are kind of dangerous and slippery, but the space between the supports for the banisters are just enough for a little type to get their head through and not be able to get it back out again. And that's reasons that there are codes to address that very thing. Something that I couldn't believe when I saw this, but we have gasoline-powered equipment and gasoline stored underneath the stairs in this building. That is completely dangerous and illegal. And the most insidious problem that this building has is, that is a picture of one of these heating ducts with the register removed, just taking a picture down. The ducts fill with water when we have a rainstorm. And what happens is when the furnace kicks on, it blows warm air across all that brackish water. That's the makings of Legionnaire's disease. Next. It's another view, and one way that we tried to abate this in 2 iterations was by installing sump pumps in the lowest spots of our heating ducts, which are all, of course, rotten and no longer ducts. But the idea would be that you could drain water out of the heating ducts into the sewer line, and then at least you could run the heating system. Now I'm told, only within the last few weeks, that the furnace that runs this floor the heat exchangers are cracked, sending carbon monoxide into the space. So that furnace has been shut down, and you'll notice there are little oil heaters planted around. That's to prevent what I'm told is an $8,000 to $10,000 expense. That corner, you'll see a patch in the floor over there, and that hides a pipe that connects from the heating duct that makes a turn over there into what was the food pantry, where that sump pump is, and there's the PVC water line that we had to put in after the fact and cement to go outside to drain because the sewer lines are so clogged. Here's our kitchen. This photograph was taken admittedly a couple of years ago, and we've made some repairs to the cabinetry. But the kitchen is illegal. We cannot cook in there, but we try to. Everything needs to be stainless steel, and especially with the scares of what's going on these days, having surfaces that you can't clean, having surfaces that just simply are so rough that there's no way to get them sanitized, to me, it's a little frightening. This is, I think, rather interesting commentary also. You see the sign on the right, please do not use the microwave while the coffee pot is brewing, the circuit will blow. And that tells you, it used to be when we had the coffee pot out here to do the same thing. It's just all the same circuit. And this red warning sign up there, I hadn't seen until recently. The sign says not to use the fire extinguisher until the central fire suppression system has been engaged. But there's no central fire system. So, this is where the central fire system ought to be. It's in the hood above the stove. The fan now does vent smoke, but not to the degree that this room still doesn't fill with it. It's a nice refrigerator, but it's not commercial grade, and this is a close-up showing the mold that's growing between the stove and the cabinetry. And in the rest of the building, mold around there and around the outside of the other stairwell. The choir room is a particularly sad situation in that our enviable choral library, it is an enviable choral library, was growing mold on the music itself and on the boxes that store the music. And so after, we thought it was just floods here that was doing that, and so Linda would dutifully wipe down all the boxes with wipes and everything. It just kept coming back and back and back. So that's why the choral library is upstairs. But the choir room itself, you'll see these are pictures of the walls. And you see the mold growing on the walls and the water stains. There's no water on the walls. That's just a result of the humidity. And that piano was donated to us, and we had, I think, $3,000 worth of new bass strings and hammers and things put in. It's a really nice piano, and it's growing mold in the ivory keys. There's more mold at the east end of the building, at the basement level. And as we go upstairs, that's the ladder you have to take to get into the attic. And not only is it illegal, but it is just dangerous. Even our pipe organ ladders are better than that. And you see that folks have ripped batteries out of the smoke detectors, and none of them are connected to a system at all. This is was kind of enlightening to me when I was up in the attic, that there's this nice space in various parts. You can see outdoors between the roof and the walls. And I know you're supposed to vent an attic, but not that way. And here's a picture that was taken just a couple of weeks ago of the roof itself. And I remember one Sunday, it was a particularly bad windstorm, and there were all these shingles on the ground, and I looked up and you could see the decking. And we had a roofer come by and they said, how long are we going to have to patch this roof? I said, well, your lips to God's ear, I don't know how much longer, but we can't let water in, so it's been patched, but that's it. And to try and minimize flooding in this space, for many times we've had to repave the parking lot, but we've just paved over and over every layer. And so we put a curb in, not just so you don't just fall down it, but it also acts as a dam so that the water doesn't quite get down into the basement of the Canterbury House. But it's a trip hazard, and that many are the drivers who have accidentally backed over it and then have to get volunteers to lift the car over the curb. And then in an effort to keep from getting people to trip, we had, where'd it go? That's right. I know I'm being given the hook. So. But we've had to put asphalt in here just so that it's more like a ramp than a trip hazard for people walking in. That's now the next one. Just to restate, you know, we've had some wonderful occasions here. This is the alumni reunion in 2008 after we finished the building, and we had a wonderful time. We had Bill Kitch is dancing, and you know, right over there in this room, tables full of wonderful people and all that. Here's the pig that's flying. Do you remember that? We finished the church when pigs could fly. That's that little mountain on that. Next, kickoff dinner for chapel completion. There's our sommelier himself, Steve. We had a little jazz combo over here. There's Gloria. I think the best costume she's ever worn. Money everywhere, money. And so many people, and generations past, present, and yet to come. Thank you.
And John,
Yes.
what about the speed